Many people look at the pastor's job as one who prepares messages and preaches a few times a week at most, sprinkling in a few other counseling sessions and meetings here and there, and that constitutes a typical week for the common pastor. In recent years, the tenure of a senior pastor has been increasing, but it's still only 6 to 10 years. Not only has our pastor far exceeded the average tenure, but his weekly, monthly, and even annual initiatives are simply remarkable. We're going to go through a few of them in what we call the out-of-the-box initiatives. Pastor Jim was hired initially in 1998 as our family life pastor, then became our lead pastor in 1999. Soon after that, he made his first full-time hire, which was Pastor Chris Heller in 1999. Next is when his out-of-the-box thinking began to germinate. In 2001, he had a small satellite dish installed on the roof of the church and hosted the Maximum Impact Leadership Simulcast. This concept was foreign to most churches and even businesses in our area. But this initiative opened the door for many local business leaders to come to our church for a live leadership training event that continued for many years following. 2003 was a big year in the life of our church and our pastor. It began with hiring Pastor Troy Ferguson in January as music and media pastor, and later that same year, bringing on Pastor John Gray as outreach pastor. During the same year, his heart for the city was manifested when he posed the question, "Who is Pleasant Valley Assembly of God, and what do we do?" God's response? A city church who ministers kingdom principles to city issues. Out of this vision, he wrote a booklet called The Framework for Ministry, with detailed application of exactly how to carry out the mission statement, which includes ministry initiatives such as the Father's House, a food and clothing ministry that is still thriving today at its new location. Also birthed out of this was the Potter's House, which was a house purchased near our property, used for a variety of ministry needs such as haircutting, counseling, as well as a resource for training on cooking and other domestic opportunities. This was just the tip of the iceberg for what was developed with this booklet. Other leaders recommended it and used it as a foundation for ministry, seminars, and leadership conferences. Establishing the heartbeat for a community in 2004, Pastor Jim led the initiative to host Convoy of Hope right here in Altoona. This was a day where Convoy brought at least one tractor trailer full of food to serve those in need in our community. 2,500 people came from all over the city to the Jaffa Mosque parking lot for groceries. But they also received haircuts, toys, and in the midst of this, every single person was ministered to through music and ministry of the gospel. This event was not about Jim Balzano. It wasn't about Pleasant Valley Assembly of God, but simply about serving people in our community. As the church continued to carry the mantle of ministering to those hurting in our community, Pastor Jim began looking for property right in the midst of the city where people were in need the most. In 2005, the church voted unanimously to not only purchase the former Prince of Peace Church for $1, but to also commit to renovate it as a ministry center for our community. That had an expected price tag of $1.3 million, and we had zero to get started. We never had a unanimous vote before that and haven't had one since. But Pastor Jim cast vision for this project, and we as the church fully supported it. This started with the need to replace the roof, and Pastor Jim led us through our first special offering for the roof of the 11th Street Project building.
Man, what a great day. This is the day we get to raise the offering for 11th Street. That's right, we have a $30,000 goal today, and we're going to raise that money so we can put a roof on 11th Street. I couldn't think of a better place to talk about doing this roof offering than actually from the roof on the 11th Street building. That's right, Pastor Troy and I are up here. We're on the roof. He's got the camera, I got the mic, and we're inviting you today to make an investment into this project.
In June 2007, we set a goal of $30,000, and your commitment and generosity shined through as you gave $76,000 in a single day's offering. To implement the overall renovations needed, Pastor Jim began the capital campaign, Answering the Call. The church committed to $527,000 over the 2-year project. Pastor Jim led us through 2 years of passionate vision casting, working many hours himself, as well as motivating volunteers to pour hours and hours into creating a community center for this neighborhood. The project became known as the 11th Street Project and was picked up by the Pennsylvania-Delaware District as Home Missions Project for 2009. Also during this process, he revamped a drug and alcohol nonprofit he developed years prior known as the Nehemiah Project. This was established to be a broad, faith-based community development organization committed to assisting underprivileged and blighted neighborhoods with services designed to enhance the lives of residents and their community environment. In partnership with the Nehemiah Project, we finished Hope Community Center and implemented several connected ministries to include moving and expanding the Father's House, opening the Father's Table, which is a soup kitchen which still serves 12,000 people every year, and also houses an expanded barbershop called Cuts From Above. In addition to these opportunities, we've seen after-school programs, adult literacy programs, recovery programs, as well as multiple churches meeting in this facility, and it includes Hope Community Church, which launched in November of 2009. In recognition of his community-oriented leadership, the Blair County Chamber of Commerce awarded Pastor Jim with the Servant Leadership Award in January of 2009. At the same time, the Nehemiah Project was instrumental in utilizing grants and donations to revamp several blighted lots to become the Hope Community Playground. Most of these ministry opportunities are still in full operation today. Not allowing for any dust to settle, in 2010, Pastor Jim initiated another major change, which was to buy and move our church from its location on 8th Street with multiple separate buildings to a much safer, convenient, and expandable single location. Through the divine timing of God, we purchased the former Blue and White Bus Company garage and offices and began the renovation immediately. This became part of the mini capital campaign called The Next Step, which was to prepare the building for us to move our offices and youth services there. A goal of $50,000 was set, and with donations, pledges, and gifts in kind, we received over $60,000. This allowed us to move our offices and continue our work on the new facility. Continuing with Pastor's kingdom-mindedness, he led us through a missions venture confronting the very real issue of sex trafficking. This was called the G90 Project, which was one God plus 90 guys giving $90,000 for one rescue home for girls. This became a significant cause for our church, with the Stained But Not Dirty initiative and Stella's House projects. Even our young adult ministry was motivated to launch a campaign of their own, raising money through a variety of activities, which included sponsoring 5K races, among other things. After this, Pastor Jim took a brief time off before launching any more unconventional initiatives. But it wasn't long until he showed us his out-of-box thinking once again. In 2013, our longtime youth pastor, Ron Ross, resigned. And instead of hiring another youth pastor, Pastor Jim, along with Wayne Schaefer of the New Life Worship Center, initiated the Sharing of a Youth Pastor initiative that's more community-minded than singular church-minded. This allowed Pastor Micah Marshall to share time between New Life and our church. This wasn't necessarily logical, but this initiative launched into what we see as Refuge Youth Network, ministering to students all across our community. The next event in our timeline is not a highlight, but actually a low point. It is a significant event in our history, and we are all aware on April 22nd of 2013, Dominic Balzano, son of Pastor Jim and Penny, passed away. Heartbreak tore through our church, our collective heart wrenched with grief during that time, but nothing compared to what Pastor Jim and Penny were feeling. Even in the midst of extreme sorrow and mourning, Pastor Jim showed a leadership like none other when he preached his own son's funeral, speaking about love and hope while he was internally mourning. In the coming months, he pushed back at any and every attack of the enemy, and not only did Pastor Jim not quit, he increased his vision and vowed to mentor and empower future generations. This led to our next phase in our building process with the capital campaign, Generation to Generation. He led us down the historical road of moves and expansions of our church over the course of many generations. This was and still is a multi-phase project, but we now enjoy our offices, main worship space, kids space, and a space for our students to meet, all under one roof. Continuing to dream big and develop creative ideas, he personally wrote a daily devotional entitled The Mandate for the entire year of 2014. This was no easy accomplishment, and the commitment of time and creativity was significant. Many have read this devotional or listened to the audio version and are still inspired daily through Pastor Jim investing in our lives outside the Sunday experience. Early that same year, Pastor wanted to make the move to utilize the multi-purpose building as our main sanctuary. So Easter Sunday of 2015, we had our first Sunday service in the new facility and have enjoyed every Sunday in the building since. Now that we're established in our building, ministries are thriving, and people are blessed on a weekly basis. Pastor decides it's time for another significant change in 2017. An idea that Pastor's been thinking about for years, a passion project led by the Holy Spirit. It's another out-of-the-box idea, and it is to change the name of our church. Pastor recognized that most church titles are based on geographic location, and Pleasant Valley Assembly of God was no different. But our heart was to have a name that identified with who we are, and not just where we are. So the vision casting and eventual change of Transformation Church took place. This was no easy task, but our staff, leadership, and church came on board and supported the rebranding of our church. We are Transformation Church. It's who we are. It's what we do. As part of the multi-phase project and extension of the Transformation Church, we began working toward building the educational wing for our children, known as Transformation Station. The plan was for this 14-classroom addition to be paid for by the sale of our former church building. But because of the significant construction costs, we needed to raise some funds to complete the project without going into debt for it. So, Pastor cast vision for another offering, which was called the Immeasurably More offering. Our goal was $60,000, of which most was given the same day. Soon after that, with pledges and contributions, we raised close to $147,000. Even with that victorious offering, costs were increasing, and Pastor Jim felt God telling him not to take another offering, but to trust him. In doing so, we held multiple work weekends, and several of you gave countless hours to make this addition possible. What you may not know is Pastor Jim personally sacrificed not hours, not days, but weeks on end to get Transformation Station ready for our kiddos. His commitment to our church and our children is not just in word, but in action as well. Since Pastor seems to enjoy taking on projects that are mammoth with little to no money in the bank to do so, he led the leadership of the Nehemiah Project to purchase the former Wright Elementary School in 2018. Even though this isn't directly connected with Transformation Church, it's still very much a part of our DNA, and we fully support this venture as it is impacting our city in ways we will never know. Giving the building a new name, The Right Place for Kids, we are seeing kids ministered to, provided for, and blessed on a daily basis. You can see how Pastor Jim's out-of-the-box mentality has benefited our church and our community. But because he is a dreamer, he has spurred on and empowered other dreamers to pursue out-of-the-box initiatives as well. Pastor John oversees the Foundry Discipleship Home, as well as other outreach ministries. Pastor Micah has launched the Refuge Youth Network, which is a community youth ministry to students from Tyrone, Bellwood, as well as Altoona. Pastor Troy has been empowered to launch Joy in the City, capturing stories and testimonies of people impacting our community. Now that all this has been said, we simply sit back in awe and honor the man of God placed in our community to put these initiatives in place. Thank you, Pastor Jim and Penny, for all that you've done. And we look forward to many more out of the box initiatives in the coming years.